Welcome to AkronHipHop.com, where we paint positive images of our people every day. My name is Deborah Calhoun. I teach at Kent State University in the Department of Pan-African Studies. And this is another installment of Understanding the Black Experience. Hey, Hiram, how are you today?
Man, I am okay. Hey, listen, people are liking what you're doing.
Good.
You're taking the time out of your schedule.
Yes.
And you got a busy schedule. Tell everybody where you work at.
I work at Kent State University in the Department of Pan-African Studies.
So what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the student movement. Given that we've had our summer of discontent just a few months ago, I thought it was quite appropriate for us to think about how is it that youth seem to be the vanguard of the revolution.
Well, let's go with it. Let's go.
Yes, so to begin today's work, I want to pick up our journey with the emergence of the civil rights movement. And with that, we know the heinous crimes that have been done to the African community, both inside and outside, from forever since we landed here. But what really touched the nerve of the African community in this country was the death of Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a young man, lived in Chicago, Illinois. His mother, Mamie, sent him south to live and work with relatives for the summer. As many African-American parents do, we send the kids south to get some education. And she sent Emmett south under the tutelage and care of his uncle. He goes to Money, Mississippi. We know that Carolyn Bryant, the wife of the store owner in Money, Mississippi, accuses Emmett of wolf whistling at her and saying something else additionally, as she said, unspeakable to her. When she told her husband, we know that they got the guns ready, got his brother in the car, and they go to the uncle's house because the uncle was a sharecropper who picked cotton as a way of generating income. So they knew where every black person in Money, Mississippi lived, and they knew Emmett was the outside boy. And so they go to the uncle's house, and we know the rest is history. The young man turned 14 while he was in Money, Mississippi. He leaves Chicago as a 13-year-old. He's in Money, Mississippi, maybe 2 weeks and turns 14. But we know the outcome of the story when there is an accusation of a crime being committed against a white woman. Emmett was killed, shot in the head with a .32, eyes gouged out, face beaten horribly, body beaten horribly, and they put a generator fan around his neck because he had barbed wire around his neck and body, and they threw him in, I think, the Tallahatchie River. And we know the rest of the story. Mamie, the mother, hears of the crime. She has her body son shipped back north and has an open casket.
Why do you think she had an open casket? I know why, but tell somebody.
She had an open casket because she wanted to see what they did to my boy.
She wanted to see what she wanted people to see.
She wanted people to see.
Well, make it plain.
The funeral director tried to talk her out of it. Mamie is too horrible. You don't want to see it. And she said, if you're going to open that casket box, I will. She opens the casket box. She sees her son horribly, visibly, physically mutilated. And we know the picture today.
So, explain how that ties into the revolution.
Well, that ties into it because Jet Magazine had the foresight to put that picture on the cover of its weekly magazine.
Uncut, raw like that?
Raw and uncut. The picture that you see on the internet is the picture they put.
Hopefully you're seeing it right next to you.
Yes.
All right.
And it is that vision that set it off in a lot of ways. 50,000 people attended his funeral in Chicago. 50,000. Mamie goes on record of trying to seek justice for her son. She appeals to the Eisenhower administration. Her cries fall on deaf ears. And eventually she goes to her grave without seeing justice for her son. And the irony of all of this is that Carolyn Bryant, 82 years old, is still alive today. And she recanted the story. It was a lie. A straight lie. Just like Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood or Greenwood, burning of a black community in Oklahoma off of a lie. this also was a lie, and unfortunately, this young man lost his life. But again, that began to and set off people's minds that we have to get active like we never have before. Another young man I want to talk about is Sammy Young. He was in the Navy, served 2 years. He is killed trying to use a white-only restroom. Killed in January, 10 years later, about 1966. But what these deaths do, it galvanizes people to action. Uh, Emmett Till's death leads to the Montgomery bus boycott in December of 1955. Later that year, it puts Dr. Martin Luther King to prominence as a civil rights leader. And what was awesome about the Montgomery bus boycott is that it was supposed to be one day, but it lasted a year. And it basically broke the segregated bus system in Montgomery. These two students pushed folks to action, and it made folks understand that we cannot stand by anymore. If I could use a segue to a modern event, the killing of Emmett Till was just as impactful as the unfortunate murder of George Floyd this summer in this country. Same kind of reaction, a visceral reaction of people across the globe, understanding because the funeral was covered in French newspapers and German newspapers and Swiss newspapers around the world. This was big time headlines. I also want to add to this beginning of student activism and mass action, the mass character of the movement, is to talk a little bit about the sit-in movement here in this country in 1960, where we know that 4 students strategized how to break segregation in this country. Remember, Plessy v. Ferguson said, separate is equal. African Americans could not be served at lunch counters. So they, as a collective, go to a lunch counter and they sit, knowing that they would not be served. And the pictures are all around the internet over what they did to those students. They had ketchup poured on them, hot coffee poured on them, mustard poured on them, food flipped up because they were not served. But they sat there as a way to prove a point that segregation is illegal and immoral. And what was awesome about the first sit-in movement from Greensboro, North Carolina, it spread to all the historically black colleges and universities in the South. It spread also to places in the North. Remember, the North was just as segregated and just as racist as the South. So it wasn't just a Southern phenomenon, it was an American phenomenon. And these students were able to, with their silent, direct action, make the point. Garnered money for the movement, led to later the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which we know would be one of the organizations that goes south to break the back of segregation and to increase rights for voting registration for African Americans in the South. I will say that the movement in this country, from Emmett Till to Sammy Young to the sit-in movement, also sparked internationally Africans to act. They had met in 1945 at the 5th Pan-African Congress, but those students who attended that conference later would become presidents of their own respective countries. Kwame Nkrumah, Tom Mboya, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Jomo Kenyatta, Sekou Touré, Kwame Nkrumah, as I mentioned, they all would become leaders of their own African countries. In fact, 1960 was called the Year of Africa because 18 to 20 countries got their independence by hook or by crook. Some by constitutional means, others they were just granted their independence because the colonials did not want to deal with the specter of black power. So in this kind of way, we see that one small act of a mother caring for her son sets it off, and it becomes a global phenomenon. And that's why we think we have students involved in the movement. In fact, not only in the Americas, not only in Africa, but we find students are on fire in Cuba. Students are on fire in Mexico. Students are on fire in the Caribbean. Students are on fire in Puerto Rico. So this movement suggests to us that students have the fire and the energy to set it off. And they were able to impact change in this country. Later, we would have students involved in the Black Panther Party and begin to talk about ways that we need to not only politically defend ourselves, but materially defend ourselves if we have to go to that route. This is it for our coverage briefly of the student movement. There are all kinds of books and literature on the student movement around for you to look at. I will even be so bold as to say that the student movement gave fire to the later Kent State 1970 shootings, because we know students were involved in that process too, protesting the war in Vietnam. This is Understanding the Black Experience. Thank you for watching. This, of course, is AkronHipHop.com. And remember, if you're watching us on YouTube, remember to like, share, and subscribe this video. Hit that notification bell. If you're watching us on Facebook, remember to share, and share again. From myself and Brother Hiram, thank you, and we will see you again next time.